I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in. Here they go again. Timbo mode, dropping the throw. Winston out again, goes to the left. It's intercepted at the 35. Outside the numbers to the 40, to the 35, to the 30, to the 25, to the 20, to the 15, 10. Mike Edwards, touchdown Tampa Bay. That's the dagger, my friend.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. It has been one hell of a last 48 hours for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The last time we talked to you on this show, myself and James Hill sat here and told you, don't expect much. A lot of guys are going to get paid, and they may not get paid by the Bucs. Jamel, Dean, Lavonte, David, still kind of 50-50 on if those guys are going to be coming back. And, on that podcast, we made a grave mistake. And the first mistake is that Evan Wanish was not available to talk some sense into us. But second, we doubted the powers that be. We doubted General Manager Jason Light, Mike Greenberg, and everyone else in that Buccaneers front office who have been making deals these last few days. I am your host, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucs fan himself from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. Evan, I missed you, but more importantly, I am ecstatic to recap the last couple of days of Tampa Bay Buccaneer news, because it's a lot of positive updates, and I know a lot of people, including us, kind of said that, guys like Jamel, Dean, we should prepare for them to leave, but it seems like a quiet free agency for the Bucs, but retaining the talent that they have, like Lavonte David and Jamel Dean were the two best free agents on this team, and I'm more than pleasantly surprised they were able to keep both. How are you feeling?
Well, not only keep both, but first off, I'm doing well. Thank you. And yeah, glad to be back. That shout out to James for reading the Bucs battle plan that I had. Sorry I couldn't be here to read it in person, just some scheduling stuff. But yeah, we're back here. And I'll tell you what, my Bucs battle plan didn't have a lot of the stuff that they've done. It had a similar idea of, signing the veteran quarterback, even had the idea of sort of the money that the veteran quarterback was going to get, but didn't have Jamel Dean coming back. Didn't have Anthony Nelson coming back. Thought both those players would be a little too expensive, and the Bucs are able to bring them back. So, I think, over the past 24 to 48 hours, there's been obviously a lot of updates, but also a lot of surprise. That Jamel Dean thing really, really shocked me. I was about 80-20 that he was pretty much gone. And then, I was expecting him to be one of the first guys when the I say in air quotes here, the legal tampering period, because let's be real here. They've been tampering for weeks.
It seems like such a brutal name for it. You know what I mean? Like, rename it the negotiation period, rename it something that isn't legal tampering, because again, it does sound just terrible, doesn't it? Like, it really gives it a bad reputation.
Yeah, like, let's go out and tamper a little bit. I thought Jamel Dean was going to be one of the first players, like, deals announced, sort of like Alex Cappa was last year. I thought he was going to be one of the first deals announced in that tampering period, and it wasn't. And then things sort of got quiet and quieter, and then all of a sudden, boom! The Bucs are re-signing him. So, at a good number too. I thought he was going to get much more than that on the open market. I mean, it's about $13 million a year when you just break down the contract. His cap hit this year is about a little over $4 million. But like, if you just break down the specific deal, it's about 13 a year. I thought he was going to get at least 16. 17, maybe even 18 million a year. And obviously, I think Mike Garafolo said that, like, this offer that was like the Bucs' final offer, like any more than that, and they probably would have been out. So I think it just shows, a guy like Dean who wanted to stay in Tampa, and then obviously the questions surrounding Lavonte David. After that, how are they going to sign Lavonte David? Well, they found a way to do that. So I started to feel a bit more confident about the David thing, though, seeing the prices that the linebackers were getting. I don't think Lavonte was probably too happy with the market because the market wasn't giving him what he needed. And that was guys weren't really getting overpaid at the linebacker position besides Tremaine Edmonds. And Tremaine Edmonds is 9 years younger than Lavonte David. So a much different situation there. And I think that, the writing was on the wall. Like, I was pretty confident that David was returning, but still a good deal. And like I said, before I let you go here, some pleasant surprises that the Bucs were able to re-sign guys like Jamel Dean and Anthony Nelson as well.
Yeah, when you look at that linebacker market, that free agent list, it seems like it's stacked, right? I mean, Bobby Wagner sitting there, Lavonte David as well. I think Bud Dupree's on there, even though he hasn't been the guy he used to be. There's a couple of other really, really good linebackers still sitting out there, and it doesn't seem like the market is that hot. At least, teams breaking the bank to sign one of these guys. But, even Lavonte David, market might not have been what he wanted. I think what's more apparent here is Jamel Dean taking well under market value, in my opinion. Like, this is a guy that easily could have been paid much more elsewhere. And I got a ton of respect for him as a player coming back to Tampa Bay, like staying faithful to the team that he won a championship with. And like, that's pretty cool to me, because on one end of the spectrum, you have guys like Lavonte David, who may have taken less money in the past to stay with Tampa. We don't really know that. But Jamel Dean clearly taking less money to stay with Tampa Bay this time around through an uncertain period. You have guys like that on one end of the spectrum, and I hate to bash him for a second week in a row, but on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Leonard Fournette, who, openly doesn't want to be here because we're not going to be guaranteed winning seasons every year, and that's fine. Totally fine. NFL players are allowed to do whatever the hell they want. I'm never going to get mad about a guy getting paid, wanting more money, wanting more carries. It is what it is. It's their livelihood, not mine. But, yeah, man, I'm just appreciative for guys like Jamel Dean and especially Lavonte David. I went on that whole rant a couple of weeks ago about how bad I didn't want to see Lavonte David in another team's uniform. So it means a lot to me that he's back. Now, I wanted to ask you this question, too. It's a 1-year deal for Lavonte. And at 33 years old, it's hard to commit for any longer than that because I feel like even Lavonte doesn't know if he's going to play after next season. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it's just kind of a wait and see approach, or, is he going to maybe look for another payday this time of year from now? Because at 34, I feel like that's going to be even harder to break out in a market like that,
Yeah, it may all depend on the type of year he has, how his body's feeling, how his mind's feeling, whether it's retirement or
you got not to interrupt you, but you got to think the TB12 method has got all these guys in Tampa thinking they can play till 40.
I don't know how he's feeling, right? I'm sure there was a thought maybe of retirement, this offseason. I'm sure it was a conversation had. I'm sure it's going to be a conversation had next offseason. So I think, just like you said, it's going to be a year-to-year thing, I think, with him. I think this was sort of the last year he had a chance to sign a multi-year deal, which even then it would have been 2 or 3 years at most. So I think from here on out, if he keeps playing, it's going to be pretty much 1-year deals. So yeah, we'll see. And like you said, depending on how he plays, what's the market going to be for a 34-year-old linebacker? We'll see. So I think that's something where time will tell that story. So we'll see, but it's good that he has a pretty good chance to finish his career in Tampa because just, nowadays, not many guys in sports do. I mean, did anybody really imagine Tom Brady wearing another uniform besides the Patriots?
Oh, yeah, no way. Did
Peyton Manning not in a Colts uniform? Like
Aaron Rodgers not playing for the Packers?
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers not playing for the Packers. Phillip Rivers not playing for the Chargers. Like, it's rare nowadays for these guys to spend all their time with one team. It's super rare. So when you get that, it's very nice. So and while it's not a guarantee that Lavonte is going to finish out his career in Tampa, this signing certainly helps it, because it felt like this year, like, ooh, teams moving in they're not really in win now mode right now. You could see David maybe chase another ring,
Yeah,
but it didn't happen.
I was convinced it was going to be Miami. Had a
Okay.
needed inside linebacker, a young team looking to make a run, clearly going all in. They trade for Jalen Ramsey, put the pieces together for Tua. I know Tua is kind of a wild card, but Miami is one of the better teams in the AFC. Lavonte David, born in Miami, Florida, so it all kind of made sense to me. I thought for sure we would see him in the teal and orange next year, but luckily,
Yeah, I mean, I thought Buffalo was
yeah.
was a real threat.
Well, and
I didn't know if he was going to go up there and play in the cold.
Mhm.
But like, if you want to talk about a Super Bowl contender that had a need at linebacker, they just lost Tremaine Edmonds. I think that would have been, and the Bills reached out as well, so I think that would have been a legit landing spot for him.
Yeah, of all the teams that were talked about, I think Buffalo was the only one that really had some legs just because of that report that came out. There was someone else that put him on a mock list that said he would be a Raider, but thank God that ship has sailed. So Lavonte David, Jamel Dean back in Tampa Bay. Some more defensive help back in Tampa Bay. Outside linebacker Anthony Nelson re-signed with the Bucs on a 2-year deal worth $11 million, up to $13 million in max value. Anthony Nelson, 11 and a half sacks over the last 2 seasons as a rotational outside linebacker. This is a Jason Light draft pick that is developed in a way that we could have hoped. I know it was a slow start for Nelly, but when we talk about these outside linebackers or even these stand-up defensive ends, it takes a little while. It takes 2, 3, maybe sometimes 4 years to see them develop all the way. And I think even as a rotational player, Anthony Nelson has been more than impressive, and he certainly earned this contract. But glad to see him back in Tampa Bay, because it does seem like he could have gotten a payday elsewhere as well.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Because like, the money's not awful. It is a little bit steep to me.
You think it is a little stiff for a rotational guy? I mean, Shaq Barrett coming off of the injury that he has. Joe Tryon's going to get a hell of a lot more playing time next year. I think Anthony Nelson could eventually, at some point in the season, unless Shaq Barrett is playing lights out, I think we'll see a lot more of big number 98.
I mean, you definitely could. But to me, it's not so much about. It's about the specific type of player. To me, Anthony Nelson, he has those, what did you say, 10 and a half or 11 and a half sacks in 2 years. When you look at the tape, some of them have come just when he's unblocked and he just gets to the quarterback first. So I like I said, I don't mind the actual contract. I just would have rather maybe go after a different type of player. Todd Bowles talked about the combine, I think, about how he's never had a defense like this past year where the pass rushers didn't lead the team in sacks. Like they had so few sacks. And I think my personal opinion is that they should have looked for a guy with that money with a bit more pass rush upside. I think it doesn't mean Nelson's a bad player. I mean, he's still young enough. He's 26 years old. It's only a 2-year deal. It's not like it's a really long-term big money extension, and he's a nice player. I just probably would have looked in another direction, and with this move, I would guess that probably means Carl Nassib won't be back. To me, he would have been a cheaper option to sign, obviously, most likely on a 1-year deal. Doesn't have as much upside as Nelson does, but I think would have provided a similar skill set. So while I don't hate the contract, this is probably the one where I'm like, did you really have to bring back Anthony Nelson? So, like I said, nothing against the player, just a personal preference of what type of player I would be looking for. But I mean, hey, you can never have too much depth at those positions. So I'm sure the Bucs won't be done adding there. I would expect them to add, a pass rusher or 2 in the draft, perhaps another depth guy in free agency. But it's not bad. It's just wish it would have been used a different way. You allocate your resources in another direction.
Yeah, and what I'm about to say, I think applies for some moves on the other side of the football. We'll talk about those in a minute, but ultimately the Bucs are proving to me and to you and everyone else who's really been paying attention, like they're banking on their young talent. This is the year for that. You know, they've had their free agent veterans, they've had their proven guys come in over the last 2-3 years, and as of right now, you've got a lot of guys in position to make or break their football careers with how they play next season. Anthony Nelson obviously just got paid, so he's secure, but you look at the offensive line, Shaq Mason just getting traded away to the Texans, a low round swap. That tells me that the Bucs are ready to move some pieces around, but ultimately rely on guys like Aaron Stinney, who just re-signed on a 1-year deal as a free agent. Robert Hainsey, Nick Leverett, who filled in at left guard, I think could start at left guard. Luke Gedecke's in the mix, but is he going to play right tackle? Is he going to be a left guard? Because, Tristan Wirfs at right tackle still leaves the Bucs without a left tackle. So we got to kind of figure that part out too. So with all that being said, the Bucs are choosing to invest in their younger talent. While they still feel they can be competitive, I think most realistic people know that you don't have as good of a chance to win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield at quarterback or Kyle Trask at quarterback as you do with Tom Brady at quarterback. So you can take a chance on these younger guys and ultimately see how it pans out.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely right. And with, the thing to me, 2 of the 3 defensive free agents that they re-signed, right? Lavonte David's the old guard, right? He's the old guard. He signed the 1-year deal, of course, whatever. Jamel Dean is still fairly young, so he's going to be, and he signed a 4-year deal, so like he's going to be there. So your secondary cornerbacks of Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, they're locked up. They're younger players. And Anthony Nelson, like I mentioned, is a younger player. Carl Nassib, if they were to resign him, he's an older player. So Shaq Barrett, I believe, is 29 or 30 years old. Shaq Barrett's even getting up there. So, if you want to re-sign guys and you want to look to bring guys back and with a reasonable price, you would look for those younger guys with like a bit more upside per se. Does Anthony Nelson have another level to grow? He's grown a lot since they drafted him. Now, does he have another level to grow? That's what we'll have to wait and see. And the Bucs are hoping, because if he does, then that contract looks like a steal. But if he doesn't, then the contract's fine. So we'll have to wait and see. And there will be a lot of young guys in Tampa Bay this year given an opportunity to play, and sort of prove themselves, and show what they can do.
Before we get into the quarterback conversation, I wanted to talk about the retention of Jamel Dean, what it means for this defense, and more specifically, the secondary. I think keeping Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean together as your 1 and 2 corners, that's huge. Realistically, we look at the improvement of Jamel Dean over last season. You hope he can continue to play like that now that he's secured the bag. Carlton Davis, while 2022 wasn't his best year, he has been more than serviceable as a number 1 corner for Tampa Bay, and that's something that this team has not had. I don't want to say ever, but it seems like in a very, very long time. Like, when's the last time we've looked at the depth chart and looked at cornerback number 1 and number 2 and said, you know what, you can rely on both of those guys? It's been a minute, right?
It's been a long time. Yeah. I mean, it absolutely has. I mean, and like I said, and both those guys are young and they're signed fairly long term. So, Carlton Davis is 2 years left, but he'll be here. So it's a secondary that you can build around.
Carlton Davis, cornerback 1, Jamel Dean, cornerback 2. Zion McCollum kind of struggled last year, but he'll obviously be back. Sean Murphy-Bunting's still a free agent, and haven't heard really anything at all about teams looking for a corner with his skill set. So where does that leave him? Because he was the odd man out for what seemed like the first half of the 2022 season, and here we are, free agency, and nobody's even talking about making it a priority to bring this guy back. With that being said, do you think the Bucs have ultimately made a decision bringing back Jamel Dean to maybe move on from SMB? Are they waiting to see what that market looks like? Because again, it doesn't seem like teams are going crazy over this guy. What does that situation seem like to you?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because when you look at it at first glance, bringing back Jamel Dean would probably signal the end for Sean Murphy-Bunting. It felt like, to me, I wasn't expecting Dean back. So I was like, oh, okay, like Sean Murphy-Bunting will be back. And now that Dean's back and he's obviously going to be the more expensive one, it's hard to imagine a world, I think, where Murphy Bunting returns to Tampa. Now, Jordan Schultz. Now, we haven't heard anything from the Bucs side per se, but Jordan Schultz, NFL Insider, tweeted out a few days ago that some teams are intrigued by Sean Murphy Bunting. I'm not sure what teams they are. But, yeah, right now you don't hear much on his market, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. If his market dips to a certain point, could the Bucs get back in? Maybe. But I think with the signing of Jamel Dean, it's gonna have to really be a pretty low price, and I don't know if Murphy Bunting's market's gonna go that low.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well, because he kind of came around second half of last year, played some more. I think made some plays towards the latter end of the year, which was good to see, but a contract year for him nonetheless. So we'll keep you updated as we know more, but just wanted to bring that name up because not a lot of people have been talking about him, at least from obviously what I hear. So let's talk about the other side of the football, and this is the news that everyone has been waiting for a while. I mean, ever since that fateful day Tom Brady decided to hang it up, people have thrown everything at the wall trying to guess who the next Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback will be. And every offseason, you get these pipe dream scenarios where people say, oh, the Bucs could do this, this, and this, and somehow Aaron Rodgers is our quarterback next year. And those never really get rolling. A lot of people get excited. You see a couple of jersey swaps on Twitter, and we really get the blood flowing. But Aaron Rodgers was someone who was talked about for 10 seconds. That ship sailed. He's playing for the Jets. Derek Carr, kind of out of the Bucs price range. They probably could have gotten him if they really wanted to leverage some more of the future, but that's all right. He signs with New Orleans. Are they going to draft a guy? Still have to wait and see, but we knew for a while, and we've been telling you for a while, that the Bucs are going to go ahead and sign a cheap veteran option. Now, obviously, my personal favorite, my pick was Gardner Minshew. I would have loved to see Minshew Mania running wild in Tampa Bay, but it just didn't shake out that way. So can't always get what you want. And with that being said, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have signed former number 1 overall pick to the Cleveland Browns, quarterback Baker Mayfield, to a 1-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. It's a $2 million base, $2 million signing bonus. So let's just say a $4 million base with up to $4.5 million in incentives for the former number 1 overall pick. Evan Wanish, are you ready to get baked?
Feeling dangerous, huh? The Bucs certainly are. So, just like you said, we knew all off season, and it wasn't just us telling people; it was everybody telling, they were going to sign a veteran quarterback. Now, what the extent of that veteran quarterback was, it could have been a Drew Lock, it could have been a Taylor Heineke, it could have been Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett. I think most would agree that out of those names, Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett were sort of the higher end of the competition per se, and then Drew Lock and Taylor Heineke probably on down a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, Mayfield it is, and Ian Rappaport comes out on Sunday and says, they're going to target Mayfield and stuff. And at that point, I was thinking to myself, well, that's done. It just, the timing of it just felt done.
Literally, I think the tweet was sent, at least I got the notification for it, 12:01 p.m.
Yeah, it was about 24 hours
just
before.
under 24 hours before the open negotiation period. That's what we're going to call it here on the show. Just before that deadline. So, it definitely had legs.
Yeah, it did. And okay, so time passes, Monday passes, Tuesday passes. You still hear some stuff. You hear they're interested in Jacoby Brissett. None of it's really a surprise. So all that passes, and then boom, there it is. Wednesday morning, pretty much. Baker Mayfield signing a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers, and I've seen a lot of people. He's a polarizing figure. He's very. There's some people who there's not. No, let me get this straight. There's nobody here saying that, oh, he's the franchise quarterback, this and that. There's some people that are way more optimistic than others. There's some people that are saying, well, he did pretty good in LA when you saw him there. He's a former number 1 overall pick. Maybe he can, sort of revitalize his career in Tampa Bay when, given that opportunity with those weapons. And everybody says, "Oh, the last time he had weapons, what happened when he had Jarvis Landry, Odell, David Njoku, Nick Chubb?"
Jarvis Landry, man, come on.
That was 2020. That was Baker Mayfield's best pro season when he went to the playoffs. So it's clearly something.
Oh, you mean the Cleveland Browns, the team that really hadn't done a damn thing since before he got there, made the playoffs?
Yeah.
I mean, a team that was 0-16 less than 2 years before that season? No, stop. That team?
And then there's others. There's the other side that think this guy is the worst quarterback in the NFL, this and that. And I think his attitude sort of rubs some people the wrong way. And I understand it. But at the same time, there's just not a whole lot of risk here. If he sucks, okay, you put Trask in. If Trask sucks, okay, guess what? If they both suck, you're getting a top 10 pick and you can get the quarterback of the future then. If Mayfield does good, you might have just found your quarterback for the next 3, 4, 5 years, like a Geno Smith situation. And I know, and we're going to bring up Geno a lot when discussing Baker Mayfield because Dave Canales being from Seattle, and it's sort of a very similar situation, like a career, resurrection. But Geno Smith is the exception. That's not the norm. Those guys don't, it's not like Marcus Mariota went to Atlanta and he did fantastic. Like, it's not like Jameis Winston went to New Orleans and did fantastic. Those guys, a lot of times it doesn't work out.
Not to interrupt you here, but we do have some breaking news via Rap Sheet. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are signing free agent running back Chase Edmonds to a 1-year deal. The former Broncos running back. What do you think of that?
Okay. All right. Yeah. I like Evans. So that should put an end to all the Ezekiel Elliott.
Oh God. Thank God, man.
Holy
think hell. Like we're gonna you're telling me we're gonna get rid of Leonard Fournette to go to Ezekiel Elliott at this point in his career?
It just didn't make any sense.
Mean, what are we doing? I'm so glad that didn't last very long.
Yeah, it never made sense. Like, dude, Zeke's like my size. And if you guys have seen me, you know what I'm talking about. But that dude, no thanks. Like, you want to talk about people were complaining about Fournette being slow. Like, people were complaining about his burst. Like, Zeke's burst is gone. So Chase Edmonds to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Zeke, with all due respect, I mean, the guy had the years that he did. He got the contract that he did. God bless him, right? Dallas decided to pay him all that money. Good for him, because not a lot of running backs get to cash out like that. Mm-hmm. But, this is a guy that a month ago, said he was willing to take less money to remain a Dallas Cowboy, and they still canned his ass. So, if Dallas, that's one of their boys. Like, you give him a contract like that, that's one of your boys. And I know by default, if you play in Dallas, you're one of the boys, but Zeke was really one of those guys that they had leaned on in that franchise for a long time. And you see how they treated him. So, yeah, no thanks. I will pass. Chase Edmonds, I'm happy about that, though. It'll be a nice running back to pair with Rachaad White, and it'll be interesting to see what that backfield can look like come week 1 of the season. Now, I wanted to get back on track with the quarterback conversation, give my 2 cents about Baker, and then, of course, talk about the other guy waiting in the wings. So Baker Mayfield, a lot of people seem to rag on the guy. A lot of people seem to praise him and maybe overhype him to a point, but I feel like most number 1 overall picks get that rap. Even Jameis Winston, 7-8 years later, he re-signs with New Orleans as a backup quarterback, takes a lot less money because he says he wants to stay healthy, but people are still going to say, he's a championship quarterback. And then there's other people who are going to say he is one of the worst guys you can ever have slinging the rock on Sunday. So with Baker Mayfield, a lot of the same still applies, but I do think the upside is there, because again, he's only 26?
He's 27 right now. I think he'll be 28 by the time the season starts. But I mean, still,
28 years old. So you can get maybe at best a 6, 7, 8 year run out of this guy if he really does live up to expectations and become the next franchise quarterback. But that's the thing, is that I think the skill set is there. I really do, because of what we have seen, right? What we've seen in the past. I think it could definitely happen. So with that being said, is there a lot of bad? Yeah, there is. But let's not forget, I think a lot of people are rushing to conclusions here with the signing of Baker Mayfield, because There is another guy on the roster. His name is Kyle Trask, second-round pick from a couple of years ago. You may have heard of him on this week's Bucs poll over on Twitter. You can find me there at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. Every now and again, we'll throw up a poll and get your opinion. We polled 101 people this week, and the question was, do you believe Kyle Trask was ever given a legitimate chance to beat Blaine Gabbert for the Buccaneers quarterback 2 spot? Now, Evan, before I reveal the poll results, I want to know your answer.
It's tough. I will say probably no, even though like they've seen him every day in practice. Like we haven't. Like they've seen him in practice. They've seen him in the meeting rooms. They have seen him up close and personal. They see what his progression's like, and we haven't. So they know more than we do about the situation. But like the reason I'm going to say no is that last game of the regular season this past year, versus Atlanta, the game didn't mean anything. Tom Brady played okay, whatever. Blaine Gabbert should have never gone in that game. If you really wanted to see what Kyle Trask could do, you have Trask play that entire second half. Instead, he comes in with the fourth quarter with like 8 minutes left and throws, I think, a total of like 6 passes. So that's why I'm gonna say no, because you had a prime opportunity there to sort of figure out what you had, and that would have been a chance. And I don't know if he was given that chance, despite what you may or may not think of him. You think he's horrible, or you think he's great. I still think that evidence to me shows that probably wasn't given much of a chance.
Also, just an update, the 26-year-old Chase Edmonds got 1.06 vet minimum for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you talk about a cap hit for 2023. That's one that you do like to see. Back to the topic of Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield, though. Or I'm sorry, Kyle Trask and Blaine Gabbert. I do agree. I think it was an uphill battle for Trask. I think there's obviously a lot of reasons. You know, he didn't blow anyone away at practice, which is another reason he probably wasn't considered sooner. But I feel like it was an uphill battle to begin with, just because of Blaine Gabbert being here, just because of Bruce Arians' comfortability with him in the offense, just because Tom Brady may or may not have leaned down on him at certain points to, I guess, install the game plan when he first got here all those years ago. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it felt like the Bucs never really legitimately considered Kyle Trask as a contender for QB2, because I think they always, just like you said, always intended for Blaine to be that guy, especially that last game in Atlanta. Why do you toss him in there? Like, we've seen him in there before. You know, you were up 47-0, 48-0 over the Lions, and you toss Blaine Gabbert in there and he throws a touchdown to Rob Gronkowski. That's what you're going to get. and we've seen Gabbert before. But back to the results of the Bucs poll. Twitter agrees with both of us. 66% of people said no, Kyle Trask was never given a legit chance to beat Blaine Gabbert for the Bucs QB2 spot. 34% say yes. A couple of response here. A good thread from TB Vinny, Tampa Vinny 25 says, Tom clearly trusts Gabbert more. I do have mixed feelings on this one. The backup job is to help the starter prepare and be ready to step in. They clearly trusted Gabbert more with that role. Clyde never seemed to like Trask from the jump, whereas Todd wanted to give him a chance before Brady unretired. This last preseason, Gabbert still had a slight edge at the same time of a visible progression in Trask's development, which still wasn't enough to supplant Gabbert. With staff and Brady trusting Gabbert, more Trask would have had to play perfect to win that backup job, in my opinion. A couple of other people say, I think the plan from the start was to have him sit for 2 years. Blaine seemed like what Brady wanted as his backup, and I don't think there was a real competition. So that is what the people say. You and I somewhat echo the same statement, but luckily with this signing of Baker Mayfield, this is the most legitimate chance at a QB1 job Kyle Trask has ever had in his entire career. And with that being said, I know we talk about the downside of Baker Mayfield, and people have said he's a bum and you can dismiss him as such, but at the end of the day, like, he's a guy who wants to play, and he's a guy who's not guaranteed that job. Like, Tom Brady was always guaranteed that job. When Tom Brady's on the roster, he's got that job, and that's just not the case. So if Kyle Trask wins the QB1 job this time in August, then I have that much more faith in Kyle Trask to be a productive quarterback for Tampa Bay, because I think I have Baker winning the job right here on March 16th. I know we obviously have plenty of months left to go, but I think Baker just maybe wants it a little bit more, and he's got the wherewithal to have been there before, even though it's been an uphill battle for him recently. But it's going to be stiff competition for Kyle Trask. Are you excited for this QB battle? I mean, we haven't had what feels like a legitimate quarterback battle in Tampa Bay in a very, very long time. I mean, we can talk about Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, but that was a franchise quarterback and a backup really kind of going at it. These are two young guys who could potentially be the future of this team.
Yeah, it's the first legit QB battle, just like you said, that you're gonna have. Because I mean, even in 2014, it was Josh McCown and Mike Glennon. I think a lot of people were like, yeah, McCown's a starter. Like, there's not really a competition there.
Oh, man, there were some Mike Glennon truthers, and I was one of them. Let me tell you, I was Team Glennon in that rivalry all day.
I think most were. I think. Then once McCown started playing, people definitely were. But then but yeah, this is the first time that that you're going to have a legit competition. Like, it is like the Bucs are not going to have a set quarterback one heading into training camp in a long time. Like, it is a long time. Even, I mean, 2001, not 2001, 2009, maybe. Like, that may be the last time they didn't have a set QB1 heading into the season, because you got to think, even with 2012 and 2013, like, while Josh Freeman, only lasted a few games in 2013, he was the starter. Like, you all knew he was going to be the starter. Like, there wasn't a competition per se. So, like, and then 2014, like I said, with McCown and Glennon, and then 2015 to 2019 with Jameis, like, yeah, he's the starter. And then obviously Brady. So this is going to be the first time in a very, very long time that it is a legit, like, who's better? Like, and yeah, I think Mayfield has the edge. He has the experience. He's been productive in his career at times. I would say he has the edge. But hey, if Kyle Trask goes out there and looks better than him, they're going to play the best guy. And Mayfield's contract is not big enough to be like, oh, we just paid him all this money. We got to do that. No, like it's a $4 million deal, essentially. Like, it says up to 8.5. That's if all incentives are reached. If he's not the starter, none of the incentives can be reached. So, like, it's basically it's no risk there, and they will play the best guy, because Todd Bowles and maybe Jason Light, they have to win as many games as possible this year.
Unless you are Jason Light and Todd Bowles. From the outside looking in, this quarterback situation, specifically with Baker, is high risk, high reward without the risk. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can lose some games, obviously. That's a risk. And again, that matters more to Todd Bowles, Jason Light, than a lot of people who are especially fiending for draft picks, tank for Caleb and all that stuff. But with that being said, the point you just made, Baker's cap hit this year, $4 million? $2 million is that? $2 million of that is a signing bonus?
Yeah, it's $4 million. Yeah, then
I mean,
it's a $2 million base and then $2 million signing.
And then Kyle Trask is still on a rookie deal, getting paid peanuts. So it is what it is, man. I mean, you got two potential franchise quarterbacks on your roster for under $7 million, under $10 million potentially, and both of them are ready to play. So we'll see what happens, but I am definitely excited.
Yeah, it'll be. Training camp, will definitely be a lot more intriguing this year, I think. Obviously, there's going to be less excitement about the actual team, like success-wise, but I think storyline-wise, I think you have more storylines this year for sure.
Oh, yeah. Are there any more storylines you wanted to talk about on today's podcast before we start to wrap things up? I think we caught everybody up on what was going on. I know there was a Russell Gage restructure in there as well, which lowered his cap hit for the Buccaneers. That happened a little while ago, but what do you think? Is there anything on your mind?
Yeah, they re-signed Aaron Stinney as well.
Yes, they did. I mentioned that in passing earlier, but let's talk about this offensive line. We'll wrap it up with this.
Yeah, because they also the Shaq Mason trade, so we didn't get to cover that really. So yeah, one guard out and then one guard back in. So Stinney was in the competition for the left guard spot last camp. Unfortunately, suffered a torn ACL/MCL against the Titans in the preseason. missed the entire 2022 season. So now hopefully he's healthy enough to compete again, because it looks like there could very well be competition, maybe at both guard spots. Because with the Shaq Mason trade, now the Bucs have a hole at right guard, but I would say a hole with probably like a little like a asterisk next to it, I guess, because they only did that because they really like the depth they have. Robert Hainsey can play it, Nick Leverett can play it, and with Ryan Jensen returning to center, that allows Hainsey to do that. So they like a lot of the depth they have. I would expect them to add an offensive lineman either in free agency or the draft for depth purposes. But Stinnie's just another guy, who can compete. And as for Mason, I know a couple people were like, "Oh, why'd you get rid of him? Why'd you get rid of him?"
They pretty much got back what they paid for him.
And yeah, like I probably would have kept him, probably. But like, yeah, it's not the end of the world. Like it's fine. Like it was a pick swap, but like you said, it's not like they gave up a second round pick for him and then you're trading him for a sixth like a year later.
They literally gave up, I think it was like pick 170 to go get him, and then they just got from Houston like pick 174.
179 is the pick they got from Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe it was 174 they gave up to go get him, but it was a pick in the 170s. So I mean, we're kind of grasping at straws here if we're talking about a difference of 5 or 6 sixth round picks.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this $1 million question. What are we going to do at left tackle? Obviously, Donovan Smith no longer on the roster. It was said that when Donovan Smith was released, there were a couple of people who have reported the Bucs are entertaining the idea of moving Tristan Wirfs to left tackle, which with the way he has played these first couple of seasons in the NFL, we can only hope it translates to left tackle, but it's a lot easier said than done. So do you think the Bucs are just going to kind of throw some guys at it? Do you think they could legitimately move Tristan Wirfs to left tackle? We talked before on the show about, Luke Edeke and that experience at right tackle. I don't know if that means he plays better than he did at left guard. Hopefully it does. But what is their plan? Because, not only do they have a hole to fill at the guard position, they got much more depth at guard than they do at left tackle.
Yeah, and that's the big question this offseason, right? Because like, where are they going to make that move with Tristan Wirfs? And in my battle plan, I did have them doing that due to budget. Like I didn't have the cap space to do a lot of things, and the Bucs may not either in reality. So I think that's going to come down to they'll have OTAs and everything, and I think they might try him out there to see how he's moving, how he feels comfortable playing on a different side, because I wouldn't expect them to add. They might add a tackle for depth purposes, but like as far as like a starting left tackle, I wouldn't expect them to add that in free agency. However, OTAs and stuff, that's before the draft, so you get a chance to take a look at Wirfs at left tackle and also take a look at Gedeke, how he looks at right tackle. And then you get to make that determination heading into the draft. If you're sitting there in round 1 or round 2, is there a tackle you like that you feel can step in day 1 and start for you at left tackle? Remember, Donovan Smith was a second round pick. He was a day 1 starter for the team at left tackle. Now, I know the team was in a different spot then. They were sort of more on the building side of things, but like, hey, these Bucs aren't in win now mode right now either. So like, it's not a huge deal if the tackle has some rookie struggles. So
Yeah,
I think it determines how much they see of Tristan Wirfs playing that left side, how comfortable he is. But I don't think we're going to get that answer until you see their draft. And if they don't really draft a tackle that high, I think you might have your answer there.
Yeah, and that's the biggest difference in the Bucs team coming into this season as to compared to the last few seasons, is that one, you obviously don't have Tom Brady. Like, this should be obvious, but again, like you said, these Bucs are not in win now mode. So in previous years, when we talked about guys like Robert Hainsey playing center, and we talked about, maybe filling it in with this guy who is younger on the roster, but do you want to take that chance because you have to keep this team as close to perfect as possible? You can't cut quarters on an offensive line with a 45-year-old Hall of Fame quarterback. You just can't do it. And the Bucs, unfortunately, were in a position where they had to do it, and a lot of those young guys stepped up. But when we talked about them in previous seasons, right, it's almost like, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka in his rookie season isn't getting more reps because you have a proven outside linebacker in Jason Pierre-Paul who can get those reps, right? And this is a guy who is there, and this is a guy who can, possibly support the team more based off of the information that we already have. With these uncertain guys, you don't want to take a chance because you want to win as many games as possible. Not to say the Bucs don't want to win as many games as possible, but you got to be realistic. And,
Yes.
just like I said at the beginning of the show, I think a lot of people know you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender with Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask at quarterback yet. Let me throw that in there for all the optimistic people, huh? We don't know if they're going to be a Super Bowl contender yet. And the only way to find out is by letting them play. And that's exactly what they're going to do. OTAs are going to be fun. Training camp is going to be a lot of fun, especially with the veterans coming back. But that quarterback battle will keep you guys updated along every step of the way. New running back in Tampa Bay as well. The Chase Edmonds news, bringing you the latest right here on the Cannon Fire podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to do it for this week's show. Evan, did we get around the horn?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And obviously, just like we were talking here on breaking news happen, news can happen at any time. So still a lot of Bucs free agents that have not signed. Oh, also Nacho signed with the Giants. So good luck to him. He got a sneaky good contract.
I mean, 12 mil a year.
No. The contract's $12 million. It's a 3-year, $12 million deal.
Okay, holy hell! I thought, all right, never mind then. I was under the impression he got 12 million. I've literally since he signed that deal, I thought it was 12 million a year, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, it's $4 million a year. Still, probably a little bit too much for the Bucs to spend there for a backup lineman like that. But he'll provide good energy for the Giants and everything. But yeah, guys like Logan Ryan, Keanu Neal, Mike Edwards, Sean Murphy-Bunting, all these guys are still out there. So we'll see if the Bucs can re-sign any of them or if they add some more outside free agents like they just did with Chase Edmonds. So we'll see, and we'll be here to cover it. So probably be talking to you, obviously sooner rather than later, because news, like I said, news can happen at any point.
Follow the show on social media. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens, especially during free agency. You can also check out my co-host, Evan, on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Bucs fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Anything in the hopper?
Not a whole lot, just continuing the coverage of free agency. So any breaking news there, I might be covering some of that. So I covered the Baker Mayfield thing with James. So so just keep an eye on that. Just for any breaking news, head over to BucsNation.com for all the coverage there.
Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Redicus. We've got the new weekly Bucs poll, so keep an eye out for that. Going to be asking some interesting questions. Love to get feedback from you guys and interact with anyone who supports the show. So follow us over there. Follow me, Instagram and Twitter at Redicus. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show. Appreciate you listening. We'll keep you updated with more Bucs news as it breaks. Keep it locked right here on YouTube and all of our podcast outlets. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.